So welcome, Mayor Miner.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Awesome. I'm so happy that we finally made it happen. I know
Yes.
you're a very busy man, so thank you.
Thank you.
So tell me about this jacket because I almost didn't recognize you.
I'm always wearing a sports jacket, and the police actually gave me this recently. Has my name on it. I'm a big proponent of law enforcement and our police and law and order, so it's the perfect jacket. So I'm glad I wore it today.
That's great. Actually, it helped me remember the police department, and you helped me recover my stolen vehicle. Do you remember?
I do. Out of your garage, correct? Your
Yes.
building's garage.
Yes. So I am a proponent and what do you call it? Like an advocate that City of Miami Beach Police Department is legitimate and they really take all crimes seriously, not just, serious crimes. They take all of them. So I'm really happy that happened.
Yeah, no.
Still have my car. The guy was so nice. He didn't tear it up. He didn't scratch it. It was intact.
Did you send them a thank you note?
I was good. Everyone tells me you should send him a thing. I was like, I want to. I almost didn't want to send him to jail, but
Is he still in jail? Do you know?
he was in court, and I think he's probably going to serve some time because it wasn't just me; it was a lot of other crimes.
Right.
It was
right.
to also Commissioner Magazine too.
Oh, it was the same individual.
Same individual.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So today I wanted to just ask you some questions that I'm so curious about your life and how you came to become Mayor Miner. I first met you when you were the commissioner.
Correct.
And you were also the enforcement attorney for Securities and Exchange Commission.
Still on.
And still are. Oh my gosh. I don't know how you do it all.
Long days.
Oh my goodness. So I wanted to just ask you how you do it. But I want to start out with how you grew up. Where did you grow up and how did that shape where you are today?
I grew up in the New York City area, different boroughs, Staten Island, Brooklyn, lived in Manhattan when I got in my 20s. Both my parents were public servants. My dad with the Internal Revenue Service for 39 years before he retired. Both still living, thank God. My mom as a guidance counselor in the public school system in New York. So, and they also volunteered. My dad was president of our synagogue for 4 years and treasurer for many, many other years. My mom doing other similar types of volunteer. So it was kind of, you see it growing up and I guess it rubbed off on me.
Wow. And what was what was the lesson that they were always trying to tell you or teach you growing up?
They're good people. One story that stands out, I remember, I was probably 12 years old or so, and USA Today was coming out. I could have the years approximately wrong. And it used to be you put a quarter in, you can get as many papers as you wanted. So my friends and I decided, we'll each take turns one day of the week. We'll get 5 papers and give it to the other. When I told my parents this, you can't do that. I'm like, no, they want you to do that. There's no limit. And they explained to me, no, when you put the quarter in, whatever the amount it was, they mean one paper. Like you're stealing if you do otherwise. So that was the types of things. I mean, that's one example. So you learn from that and you realize that's the way you live your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's justice, right? I don't know. I don't ever want to be caught stealing, but sometimes you do it because you think you're not going to get caught, and then sometimes just that moral compass that just brings you back, and you're like, even though I could, nobody's going to find out. Right. I really shouldn't.
Exactly.
So, what did you want to be when you were a child?
A baseball player.
Really?
I used to play a lot of baseball. I actually didn't. I played until about 7-8 years ago. I played pretty competitively. I switched to softball at some point, but fast pitch softball, good competitive leagues. Always loved baseball. So in the back of my head, I always thought, but I kind of, realistically, I knew that I was not going to be a baseball player, but that was my love. And even though I did well in school, I didn't really think too much about it until I was in college. What am I going to do with my life?
So when you were in college is when you came up with your career plan?
Pretty much. I debated with, I was a major in psychology with a minor in economics, and thought about the psychology route, but ultimately went to law school.
Okay.
Took a class in college about the American government, something of, I don't remember the exact name, and I was mesmerized. I mean, even though you grow up, you know a little bit about American government, but this really went into a lot of details, and I loved it. I loved it.
So did you have a game plan once you were in college of what you wanted to do as a career?
Well, I debated between psychology and law school, and then took the LSATs, got into law school, and ultimately that's the track I took. But didn't law can take you in so many different directions. Many people go to law school and don't even practice law.
Right.
They're using it for the degree and the skills you learn. So although I pretty much knew I was going to be a lawyer, I kind of went in just wanting to do well. I didn't really put too much thought. Okay, what career path am I taking? I didn't have a specific interest in the law. I figured I'll figure it out.
Okay. And how did you end up at SEC?
So I started out at I did well in law school, finished in the top 6% of my class. So got a job at a boutique firm called Martin Clearwater and Bell. Did that for almost 2 years, and then ended up moving to a very large international firm, Dewey Ballantine. Great firm. I had a great experience there. Was traveling the country for a good part of 2 years on a case. Then ended up going to another firm, Mayer Brown Romo, another large international law firm, and did that for 5 years. And ultimately wanted to move down to Florida, got married, was starting a family. And some of the hours that I was putting in as at those law firms, whatever you see and read about those law firms, it's true.
That's true.
And I applied to the SEC. I started doing some securities defense work, so I had the background, and applied to the SEC in Miami and got the job.
Awesome. So now that you have that and you're working as an attorney for the SEC, now how did you get into politics?
Yeah, what's funny is if you told me 10 years ago, and I am not exaggerating this, if you told me 10 years ago that I would be an elected official, let alone the mayor of Miami Beach, I would have looked at you like you're out of your mind.
Really?
Wasn't even on my radar. It just shows you how life can take so many different paths and turns. I didn't really follow the local politics. Kind of happened slowly. It was like a metamorphosis. And there were certain things, like in my immediate area, I live in Mid-Beach, that I thought there could be better lighting. They could be more decorative lighting. We could have better police presence. And those types of things and I try to start small, went to some community meetings, started reaching out to commissioners. And it happened slowly, but those things didn't happen. I didn't achieve those. And I'll never forget, I met with one of the commissioners and he told me, the best way to get it done. I'm like, how? He's like, be a commissioner. And I didn't all of a sudden run, but it was a process. It took several years, but I kind of got the interest. I started learning about it and ultimately made a decision, I can do this. I enjoy this and I think I'll be good at it. So I gave it a shot.
Wow. And how did you balance out work full-time, a family with children, and now running for office?
It's a lot of hard work. I'll tell you, it's there's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts in life. You just luckily I've been fortunate in that I've met good people to help me at the right time. I raised very little money in both my races. Even for mayor, I raised going into the runoff, because there's a separate sort of, when there's a runoff, we can get into that. But there was $4 million spent in the race. There were 4 candidates. I had $86,000.
Oh my gosh.
And I finished first and got into the runoff. So, how does that happen? There's many different facets to it. Probably too long for this this talk, but one of them is that I had good people that really just volunteered their time, believed in me, and because I didn't have the money to pay the high-priced consultants. But I also think residents recognized that I was doing things just because I thought it was best for Miami Beach. I had no ulterior motives, including the fact that I came out publicly in both my races that I will not say a negative word about my opponents. I'm just going to talk about the issues.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done. People told me that I was crazy. I'll never win if you do that. And I'm like, I'd rather lose. I'm going to keep my dignity. I'm going to keep it straight. And so far it's worked out.
Thank God, because I always felt like there was always a better way than trash talking your opponent. I understood the idea behind it, right? The whole philosophy, or the tactic, but
right.
The fact that you won without doing that says
it shows
there is another way.
Yeah. The irony is, I think it ended up helping me from a strategic standpoint because I think a lot of voters didn't know. I've heard people say to me, like, I really like the fact that you didn't go negative, and I'm supporting you because of that. I didn't do it for that reason. I didn't know that would be the effect. I think it helped me as well. But it was more, it's not who I am. It's funny thing is, even if I did it, I would lose that game. It's not my personality. So if I started slinging mud, it's just gonna get much worse.
Yeah.
And it's not who I am. I sat down with my family and I told them, I'm like, we're not. There's actually something in Jewish law, and it talks about it, and that it's pretty grave sin to speak ill of other people, speak badly about them. It's actually considered like you're killing them, and in a way, it is actually.
Yeah.
So it's not who I want to be, and luckily, it worked out.
That's amazing. I'm a big believer in that too. And for me, the way that I've read and studied, when you talk bad about others, that it's toxic for your body as well as the other person. It's actually, you're literally getting yourself sick in talking negative about others. And then that transfers to the other person too, and will affect their success too.
I believe it.
Yeah. So that's amazing. I didn't know that. Well, actually, I did. I didn't see you talking bad about anyone.
Right.
But I didn't know that was something that you actually set out to do.
Yeah. I actually, the day, again, there's a lot of materials out there, so it's easy to miss. But when I announced that I was running for mayor, I did the same thing as commissioner, but as commissioner, it wasn't as high profile, right? Nobody even knew who I was when I was running for commissioner. But when I ran for mayor, I was obviously a sitting commissioner for 4 years, and mayor is much more high profile. So more people did notice it, and I did come out publicly and I said, I will not say a negative word, and I didn't.
That's awesome. So when did you decide to go from commissioner to mayor?
It's a good question. I wouldn't say there was any specific moment. It was definitely several years into my commissionership. I didn't set out to run for mayor, but I guess after about because it's a 4-year term. So when we were about 2 years away, maybe a little less, I started thinking, I wonder who's going to run for mayor. Who's it going to be? And I was just watching the landscape, and I didn't do a whole lot to prepare. Again, I didn't have the money, and I didn't have a professional consultant. But as we started inching closer, and I saw what the field was, and I got to the point, I was a very active commissioner. It's one of the reasons I won as mayor. And I felt like there's a lot of things you can do from a legislative standpoint, and I continue to do that as mayor. But there's a lot of behind the scenes administrative aspects to the mayors and commissioners, but the mayor obviously having a more prominent role that you can get done. And I realized I felt like I'd kind of fulfilled a lot of what I needed or wanted to do from just a pure legislative standpoint. And that to get to that next level where I believed Miami Beach could be, I'd have to be mayor. So I'd like to, I mean, in part I believed in myself, but I believe in our residents. I feel like I'm just doing what our residents want.
Right.
And I just believe that that's the only way it's going to get done. And I was very satisfied, like, because some people told me, like, you're taking such a risk running for mayor, like, because you have to pick one. So I wouldn't be commissioner.
Right.
And I'm like, that's okay. I'm not here to just fill a seat. I'm here to get things done.
Wow. So what would have happened if you lost?
We wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I would be out of office. And that would be okay. I was okay with that.
Did you have another plan?
To run? I mean,
if you didn't,
I'd probably, I don't want to say never. It's hard to know. Thankfully, I've been in 2 races and I've won both of them. So it's hard to know how I would react. But I think I would have been fine saying I gave it my best shot. And there's other things in life. It's hard to know.
Right.
So I don't want to put, but I was very satisfied that I was making the right decision at the time, especially looking at the field of candidates. And this much I know about myself, I would have 0 regrets. I knew that I was making 100% the right decision to run. And if I lost, I was okay with that.
Some people say that they know that they were destined to do something or they had to go because there's like this innate fire inside them that is leading them there, that you just have to do it and that's it. There's no questions asked. It's like I hear that a lot with artists, with musicians and painters. They say, this is what it is. I'm a musician. This is what I do. This is where I'm being led to. I have to do this. And same way with painters, or any type of artist. And with you, I wonder, is that a feeling that you got when you're like, this is where I'm going. This is how I know, or I don't know, but this is where it's taking me, and this is where I'm going.
That's a great question. I don't know if that's what made me decide, but when I was running, and again, because of the comparably lack of money that I raised, a lot of people wrote me off. Well, he can't win if he's raising so little money. But I think it was that drive and also belief in God. Like, if I'm in this position, I'm in it to win. Like, I don't think I'd be led down this path just to lose.
Right.
So there was never I don't know what's going to happen. I didn't sit there and think I'm definitely going to win, but I had an inner belief that I'm here for a reason and I'm going to win.
So the odds were against you. You didn't have a consultant. You didn't have a big budget. What did you do to get your votes?
So I did a couple of things that were atypical in a race. One, I actually wrote my own materials, my own flyers. So the average flyer that you get in the mail, and you get a lot of them, are just like, a lot of pictures and saying public safety or more stronger police, or I'm going to reduce traffic. What I did is I picked topics, and then I wrote literally 4-page flyers in small print, a couple of pictures, but like it would take you like 15 minutes, probably 25 minutes to read all my materials. And I wrote them myself. And I had people, like smart people, elected officials, consultants, call me after I'd mail these out. Like, what are you, crazy? Like, nobody's reading this. Like, why are you sending this out? Like, nobody does this. Like, you don't know what you're doing. And I'm like, well, I give our residents more credit than that. Some people are going to read it. And even if people don't read it, they're going to have that image. Okay, this is a serious person. This is a serious candidate. He's telling me what he's done. I wasn't just writing what I'm going to do. I was telling you, this is what I've done for 4 years.
Right.
And I think that the other thing is I'm fortunate to have a lot of people that I'm connected with and close with. And I was the first one, even I was the last candidate to file. I was the first one to put out yard signs.
I remember that.
Right. And they were everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm lucky, fortunate, whatever the word, but I don't even remember the number. I had about 600 yard signs out there, and all the other candidates were trying to catch up to me, and combined, they didn't have anywhere near the amount of yard signs I had. So I used that to my advantage, because even though I had a very limited budget, that's something you see every single day. You're driving and the signs are everywhere. Yeah. So you can't put a price on that. And I always factored that would be the sort of the ace in the hole that I had that nobody could replicate.
Right. Yeah. Those are really good tactics. This is just one silly example, but I remember when I was running for president of my high school, we had to do also a campaign to get our votes. And I had to come up with something also creative in a way that that my competitor wouldn't be able to do. And it was maybe 2 days before voting. And my friends and I inflated like 100 balloons. And on all the balloons, we drew our cartoon images of us to vote for us. And we passed it around to all of our friends. And after that, everyone was like, whose birthday is it? Like, why does everyone have balloons? And it was all for us. And at the end, we won because they couldn't turn around 100 balloons the day before elections.
See, it's you got people talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, and by the way, so early on, I had some signs in front of apartment buildings, which actually can have larger signs. So there are different sizes based on the zoning. And someone came on a Friday night and tore down my signs.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
luckily, one of the buildings had a video footage of it, and the media had reached out, and or I reached out to the media. I don't really remember, but either way, it got some pretty significant coverage.
Oh,
So, like, you couldn't put a price tag on the coverage it got me, and then it also stopped the stealing of the signs because they realized it had the opposite. It was clearly orchestrated. There was somebody. This was not some random person. This
Right.
was designed.
yeah.
But it had the opposite effect. So it kind of, I mean, I still had some signs stolen, but not to that level. So you realize, again, that, like, that they tried to hurt me, but they ended up helping me.
Yeah. What is the one belief that you carry through that leads you to your successes?
God. One word. It's just, it's not, it sounds like a simple answer to make, and I get stressed too. Every person does, but for the most part, like, I take almost everything in stride, no matter how hard it gets, because I believe that there's a plan, and there's so much outside of our control. We were, when you take the step back and look at the big picture, we're small players in a much bigger apparatus that is so far beyond any of us to have control over. So I do the best I can. I make the best decisions I can. I work hard. I come prepared, but ultimately, I trust in God, and then I'm at peace. People say, "Do you lose sleep at night?" I'm like, no.
I know your demeanor is so calm and so cool, considering how much you do. I don't know how you do it, but now I do.
No, thank you.
You trust that there's a greater being that's guiding you through and making those leading the way, so you don't have to worry. You just do what you have to do.
And I I guess it's also what I kind of see it, like, at every step that I've gotten to a point where, like, I can't do this. Like, there's been somebody, usually it's a person, that's come to help me in my campaign. My first race, it was literally just me. Like, I didn't have anybody backing me, and I met somebody who's now my senior policy advisor, Danny Summer, and he literally, without pay, devoted hundreds of hours to helping me in every way. Running for mayor, it's now my chief of staff, Veronica Coley, who devoted tons of her time and her skills to help me. Because, I mean, now you're dealing with such a higher level mayor than commissioner. So it's having those people who believe in you, who are helping you. It's like they're godsends, because I couldn't do it without them. As much as I'm doing, you need a support team.
Of course.
Luckily, and of course my family too. That's always there. And my daughter, by the way, who's like 12 years old, she was 11 during the campaign. She was constantly giving me advice, and by the way, very astute advice.
Interesting.
You'd be surprised. She got it. She was spot on. So yeah. So the family and my wife, she's like, she doesn't follow the policies. She is not into that, but she knows how to get out the vote. She calls people and got people to make sure they went and voted. So again, it's like having all those people who are fighting with me.
I remember she came up with a amazing slogan.
That is, she
A
did.
minor change goes a long way.
Oh my God, you got it right on. She came up with that. And it's catchy, right?
I loved it.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I noticed. My background is in advertising. So when I saw that, I was like, brilliant.
Right.
Brilliant marketing.
See, I could have probably spent $100,000 on a marketing firm to try to come up with a term. And here, it's family, it's friends, and we're getting it done.
Yeah. No, excellent. So what surprised you the most when you first started as mayor?
I don't know if there's been any major surprises, because, I'd spoken to the prior mayors, but probably the thing that hits me the most is the intensity of the volume that comes at me or the person who's mayor. Luckily, my team is much larger than I have. I mentioned Veronica and Danny. Daphne Saba's here, my communications officer. I also have my aide, Blake Govana. I started a new position, a public safety enforcement advisor, because I felt public safety, law and order is so important. I created a new position, Chris McClenick. We just hired a constituents affairs manager, Omar Garcia. I only had one person as commissioner. The mayor, you have so many, and everyone is super busy.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is there's many more responsibilities as mayor. So there's that aspect. But you also have a lot of residents who come to me directly and they expect the mayor to handle it. And so it's often coming to me. So I got to respond, or at least I have to divvy up the responsibilities to my team and forward those emails. And sometimes give direction, but I have a great team. They kind of know how to handle things as well. So just the volume that comes out, it's think about it. It's emails, it's text messages, it's phone calls, it's WhatsApps, and it is. I don't know the number percentage wise, but it's a lot more than when I was commissioner.
Wow. No, I can just imagine that. And so, what part of your job do you least enjoy?
I don't like campaigning. I'll be the first one to admit that. That's not part of the job, so that's a little bit different. Some people like campaigning.
Right.
There's aspects of it that I like. And somebody once asked me, like, why do you like the job so much, but you don't like campaigning? And I never thought about it, but I quickly realized, I'm like, when you're campaigning, you're asking people for things. You're asking to help you. You're asking for money.
Right.
But now people are coming to me. I like that. I want to help people. So
Of
I'm
course.
not asking, for the most part, I'm not asking anybody for anything.
Yeah.
The part that I like the least is, I know this is going to sound cheesy, the politics. I really try to, that's why I don't say anything negative about people. Like, I try to keep the politics out of it. Actually, I was talking to a resident the other day who I didn't think followed it that carefully. And she actually said to me, she goes, you know why I think you're doing so well and why people like you as mayor? I'm like, why? And she's like, because you're not political. Like in a political game, you keep the politics out. I hope that makes sense to people. I don't get involved in all the drama, and I just try to get the job done. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you an example, if I may.
Yeah.
When spring break, which was a huge success for our city, and there's many reasons why it was a success. So, but putting that aside, one of the things I did that hadn't been done before is I reached out to the governor and I said, can we have state resources? We need resources. Sometimes they had given us after the problems. This was proactively before we had any problems. And they told us, and they were great. The governor was great. He introduced me to their head of law enforcement. They were great. And they said, anything you need. And then they said, we're going to give you 30 state troopers the big 2 weekends, 15 on the 1st and 4th, 30 2nd and 3rd. And my first reaction was, that's great. That's really helpful. Thank you so much. Can you do more? They're like, more? Do you know what 30 officers is? And in addition to our Miami Beach police, I said, I know, but we really got it. We got to bring the law and order back this spring break. And they gave us 46.
Wow.
So again, that's taken the politics out of it. I didn't say, well, we need your help. Let's get it done. And we did.
Yeah. And it was a great success.
It was.
So much. It really changed my perspective on being in Miami Beach during those couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually pleasant.
Yes.
I didn't feel like I had to run away.
Exactly. I'm hearing that from a lot of residents, and it's the best feeling. It was a huge success, and now we just got to replicate it next year.
Yeah. At some point, I thought it was a repellent. And I think it in part it was, and it said, "We're breaking up with you."
Mm-hmm.
What was it?
Breaking up with spring break.
Wait, breaking up with spring break, and there was a lot of barriers to entry into coming and driving into Miami Beach. And I thought at first, well, that's going to deter everyone from wanting to come and have a good time. And maybe that might impact businesses. But I think what it did was it just made everyone that is responsible, that wants to come truly to have a good time and not cause trouble, to come.
Exactly.
So
That's exactly what happened.
Brilliant.
And by the way, a lot of the business, if you look at the tax receipts, the hotel revenue, it was actually up slightly. Some businesses, they get hurt, and I don't take that lightly. But a lot of businesses reached out to me and told me they did better this year because people felt comfortable. And I saw it myself. I was out there I was out every Saturday night on Ocean Drive, and it was nice. It was very calm. It was like any other weekend, and it was brisk. Businesses, restaurants were doing well for the most part, and it was calm.
Yeah.
It was safe.
Yeah, I felt that. So let's talk about challenges. What would you consider one of your, failures aren't really failures, right? They're always like blockades to lead you to your success. What would you consider to have been one of your biggest failures?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm so optimistic. I'm always thinking the positive. It's hard for me to actually come up with the great. Do you mean as an elected official or in life in general?
In life in general.
I don't know. That's a tough one. I feel like I'm so blessed in many ways. Love my family. I have a job I like. I'm mayor of Miami Beach. It's like sometimes I still have to like pinch myself. Like,
Yeah,
wow, I'm not sure there's anywhere in the world you wouldn't mention Miami Beach and people wouldn't know it.
of course.
And I get to be the mayor of the city and our great residents. I don't know. Maybe we can go back to that one. I actually can't off
Yeah.
the top of my. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm punting, but
No, at all. It's I get it. Just me.
and, and maybe part of it's like some things aren't always failures. They're maybe I feel like they're meant to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And what do you have? Well, no, let's skip that one. What would you say is your okay, so how you do it all is beyond me, so I need to know. What is your day-to-day like? How do you get everything accomplished, including seeing your family?
yes. So I wake up generally 5:30 in the morning. Start doing my answering emails, doing my city commission work. Then I have my regular job as an attorney, and then when I finish that, I go to City Hall.
And what time is that?
That's it. So every day is a little different, but generally my schedule is like 7 to 3
Okay.
as an attorney, and then I go to City Hall. I have meetings with residents, or really I try to meet with anybody who reaches out. So that keeps busy and. At first, it was tough because everyone was coming all at once to have those meetings, and then there are events to go to, right? And that's another part of the job. As commissioner, I went to a lot of events, but as mayor, I feel like it's a really important part of my job to be present and at these events. People, I don't want to say they expect it because I get a lot of positive feedback from people. Oh, mayor, wow, you're really at everything. Like, how do you like? So it's, but I do feel it's important. I still go to every homeowners association meeting, if assuming there's, sometimes I have a conflict, but generally I'm at every one, which historically has not always been the case for mayors. But I feel it's so important. I want to hear the residents. I want to hear the issues. I'm the mayor. I want to hear what's important to you. So then I go home, spend some time with the family, and then generally when everyone goes to sleep, I work out, I do some more work, but also I have a great team. We're all working together for the same goal, and we get things done. It's intense, but we respond to our residents. We still coming up with good legislation, and I think a lot. I think we we cut out a lot of the clutter of the drama. There really is. I don't want to name, but I may be talking about somebody who's not a current elected because I've been through, but I've seen elected. They spend so much time on like just not being productive use of time for the residents, and it doesn't gain anything anyway. So I feel like I use my time wisely.
Yeah.
And I don't have a choice really.
Yeah.
So I have to use it wisely,
Right.
Because the time it's my most precious commodity.
So like I mentioned to you, I'm in the process of writing a book.
Which is awesome.
And three of the things that I really want to emphasize that I find to be challenging in teams, organizations, even at home with family is, but mostly it's talking about work, is connection, effective communication, and empathy. And I find a lot of the times that leaders, especially leaders and managers and people that oversee teams, struggle with their team members' lack of effective communication and having to put out fires many times throughout their day instead of using it for more productive stuff.
Right.
And so I wonder for you if you've noticed within the city of Miami Beach, if any of those three things you feel are can be improved, and if there's one that stands out for you. So connection as in, having everyone work together as a team versus being in silos, or there being better communication so there's less misunderstandings. Oh, this person talked to me like this, or how can this person expect for me to turn this in for them if, I have all these other things I have to do, or in empathy, I mean, understanding someone else's perspective. So you have a job to do, someone else has their job to do, but you think yours is what you need to do is more important than what they have on their plate, and you need something from them, and so you expect them to do it now and then, right? And so do you find that to be a challenge at City of Miami Beach, any of those things?
So to break it down, I'll talk about communication first. So one, there's my team that I told you about, my inner core team. I have not seen that at all. I mean, they're really superstars. So I haven't seen that lack of communication. But then you have sort of the mayor and the commission, and we're dealing with the city administration, the city manager, the police chief, the other departments. And luckily, for the most part, we work really well together. But there are times when we are not on the same page. That's part of how government works.
Right.
And so I wouldn't even say it's a lack of communication. Sometimes it's just, and I can give you examples if you want, but it's sort of making sure things are done the way I believe they should be done. Because ultimately, and I've said this before, I say this sometimes when I go to roll call for police and I thank them. I'm like, because I'm law and order. I have a lot of legislation. On this commission agenda, I have probably 10 items relating to crime and policing and prosecution and judiciary. But ultimately, I could propose, and our commission could pass all the legislation in the world. If it's not implemented by the police or code enforcement or whatever department it is,
right,
a piece of paper is meaningless.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the big push comes in. For my team, though, I don't see it. I have a lot of empathy, and I think my team does too. I actually will write that in emails. Like, people will write stuff, whatever, and I'll write. I'll spend a few sentences showing, like, I feel for them.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what's important, to put yourself in their shoes to understand why it's so important. By the way, I usually think, I think for the most part this is true, if people are reaching out to me, they've exhausted every possibility. Most people don't come to the mayor in their first thought. They come to me when they think, or they haven't been able to resolve something. So I realize for them, this is a really important issue in their life. It may be right now one of the most important things they're dealing with, and usually it is. So I get that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to resolve it for them. And at a minimum, one time I remember, usually, we have a high success rate. One time I ran into a resident afterwards, and I'm like, I'm so sorry we couldn't resolve it. And they're like, no, you don't understand how much it meant to me. That's just that you responded and you tried.
Yeah.
You're giving people, it's so important to give people that dignity and respect that, that at least I'm going to give you the effort.
Yeah. I think that is one of your greatest traits, is that you always take the time to respond, no matter how late it is, but as promptly as possible. And you take every issue with the same level of importance, regardless of the severity.
Yep. No, we try. And then there's the communication aspect to the public. And that's, luckily I have good team members who I've mentioned some of the names, and I've gotten better at it, but marketing is not I'm an attorney, and I like to get things done. I understand the law, which I know has helped me tremendously as a legislator. Mm-hmm. No question. I've even written some of the stuff myself, and we have a great city's attorney's office, but communicating that and telling the public what I'm doing is important. Otherwise, how would people know?
Yeah.
Some people watch the commission meetings, but most people don't. People have their lives. They have their families. They have their jobs. So it is important. But ultimately, it's also important to just be true. I'll give you one example. It was after the tragedy of George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And it was a tragedy. And you had COVID going on. And obviously, our country was going through a very tumultuous time. There was a lot of talk in many jurisdictions about defund the police, which I do not believe in at all. quite the opposite. So I was actually sending out emails and working on legislation that was talking about ramping up police visibility, making sure we're prosecuting our crimes. And I passed some very transformational legislation on that. But I had people who were even my allies call me up like, you should tone it down. Like, this is not the time to be talking about more police visibility, more prosecution. And I'm like, no, this is exactly the time. And I actually thought I was going to get a lot of pushback. I don't know. I mean, this is 6 months, a year into my being elected. I don't know what the reaction is going to be, but I believed in it. Mm-hmm. And I believed it was the right thing. And ironically, I turned out to be right politically because our residents embraced it.
That's so interesting because many times, especially in politics, you see politicians doing what they think people want to hear versus doing what they believe in. And at the end, you don't really know what they believe in because they're just going with whatever they think can get them more votes.
Correct.
And then in your case, you just spoke out, and contrary to whatever anybody else would probably say, or they could have just totally canceled you, and be like, hey, no.
Could have.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie and say it didn't cross my mind, but ultimately, and that gets back to, I'm not there to fill a seat. I'm there to get things done. And actually, I remember when somebody called me and he's like, you got to tone it down, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what's the worst going to happen? He's like, you'll lose your next election. I'm like, exactly. That's the voters' right. If they don't believe in what I'm doing, they will not vote for me. And that's their right to do that. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of different things. There was a few votes that I took on things that people said to me, why would you do that? If you just voted the other way, you'd insulate yourself from the criticism. I'm like, but I'm not looking to insulate. I'm here to make the vote that I believe is right. During this same time period, we're talking about, during COVID, there was a resolution. And by the way, a lot of the electeds then are not the same electeds on this commission now. So I'm not criticizing the current ones, but there was a resolution that had some language that was very, I thought, it was really one sentence in a very larger document, but it was, in my opinion, explosive against America. I felt it was not an accurate statement. And I pointed it out. I said, I'm not going to vote for this because this sentence, I do not believe in this. I read it out. And I was the only one who voted no. It passed 6-1. And I heard after the fact that there were some people who thought, wow, I cannot believe he voted no. But I think in hindsight, like if that same vote came up today, I guarantee you it would not pass. And it would be 7-0, in my opinion. It was the moment that everyone was in. So like you're saying, in the moment. And I think people want leaders, and I think people recognize that they want leaders who are not going to be at the whims of the moment. They're going to do what's right.
Exactly. What, you just brought something up that, okay. You work with a series of people that are all over the place. And one of the things you said that you don't do is get into the politics, right? And one of the things you least enjoy is the politics of it, right. Ironically enough.
I know.
And so the people that, you're encountering every day. Some of them are more into politics. Some of them also give into what's happening versus taking a stance for what they believe in. And you're dealing with all these different personalities. So how do you have the patience to be around people that don't carry your same belief system? And clearly you can see through potentially, the politics, you see the politics playing out right in front of you. How do you deal with that?
It depends on the situation and the person. I mean, if somebody's, let's say, criticizing me, I just pretty much I ignore it. I don't even really respond to it. Like if they disagree with a vote of mine or whatever it is, for the most part, I just ignore it. Like I'm not going to spend my time and energy trying to counter. I'm going to put out the information that I want to put out, which is going to be positive, and say what I'm doing. Yeah. And once in a while, if somebody once criticized me on a certain vote, but criticized me unfairly. It was not accurate what they were saying. But I didn't even address that. But in my newsletter, I wrote about the vote and the issues.
Yeah.
So I didn't even, but so if you're reading it, you see, okay, this is what happened. I didn't, without even mentioning the other person who criticized me. That's my avenue to, and I just keep focusing on that. Everything else is noise.
Right.
It's really noise. It's not useful. Our residents don't want it. And I mean, I'm here, I'm there. And I think our residents notice that. I do believe, I always believed that. I always believed people want to hear about the issues. And they want you to be straight with them. Like one of those 4-page newsletters that I mentioned about, I called it, I'm going to be your law and order mayor. Now it's interesting now, a lot of commissioners are using the term law and order. It's becoming more part of the jargon. At the time, nobody was using law and order. It was public safety.
Right.
And again, people would call me up like, what are you, crazy? Like you sound radical. I'm like, what's radical? It's law and order. That's what it is. I mean, we have laws and it should be orderly. I don't think it's radical at all. I'm just saying that we should enforce our laws. That's what I'm saying. And I'm telling you what I've done. And I think our residents grabbed onto that. They appreciated
for sure.
the honesty, and also that this is who I'm going to be. If you like this, then you should vote for me. If you don't, then I'm not your guy.
So what is on your agenda? What are the things that obviously, clearly law and order is one of the topics you're most passionate about. So,
and that continues.
What is one of your goals as mayor?
So resiliency is a big issue. We just had a major storm and flooding. So we're constantly, we have some major projects in the work, but also the infrastructure of our city. It's not always glamorous to talk about or even implement, but it's so important. And again, I have a lot of faith in our residents, and we have a really smart, intelligent resident base. And I'll give you one example. In Mid Beach, the main water main that literally gives water for the entire Mid Beach area had to be replaced. The old one was over 66, close to 70 years old. It was cracking. I mean, it was going to be disastrous if we didn't. But there's some traffic hiccups that come with it, as you could see if you drive down 41st or Indian Creek. But the city and myself, the city and I also sent out a lot of materials that this is coming, this is what we're going to do. And for the most part, there's been very few complaints. It's actually run pretty smoothly. But it definitely have been some inconveniences and challenges to people. But people get it. They understand it has to be done.
Yeah.
So we need to continue that because our infrastructure is aging. And so that is top priority. It's also impacts so many different other things. If we want to, and one of the things I ran on and implemented as soon as I got elected is we have to stop the overdevelopment because we are an island and we were getting too much. But at the same time, even the little bit of development that we have, I don't mean development so much, but sort of replacing older buildings with newer ones, you need the infrastructure, you need the sewer and water piping. So that's a major goal of my administration.
And so what, besides the water mains, and what else are you doing to help the infrastructure?
Well, in certain areas, one of the big debates that has happened and has stalled our projects is we want to have better pumping and drainage in certain areas in conjunction with potentially raising the roads. The pumping and the drainage is a no-brainer. Everyone's on board, and better infrastructure and replacing older pipes. The challenge comes with the raising the roads, because especially in residential areas, people are afraid that when you're higher than your residential property, now in theory, everything should work fine. The pumps are going to work, everything's going to work. But if something doesn't, your home is going to get flooded. And I get that, and I understand that. And we've had several projects that have been in the works that ended up getting canceled because of that very issue. So I'm going to be pushing that we got to go forward with the infrastructure part. Even if we don't raise the roads, if we raise it only slightly as compared to more robust, we have to do it. Right. And the problem was because you don't want to do it twice. You're ripping up the road, so you got to make your decision and do it. So I'm going to be pushing that because we cannot wait any longer.
Yeah. And what about all the businesses in Miami Beach I see a lot of businesses leaving and some coming in, but they seem, I don't know if they're here to stay or they're just, pop-ups for now. how are we going to get and keep businesses with everything going up and becoming so expensive?
Yeah, so permitting and improving that process is high on my list. We're actually and our commission again, our this is a good commission, by the way. We don't always agree on every issue, and it's for the most part we get along, but it's politics
Right.
sometimes. But for the most part, we have the same vision, more so than even our last commission. So permitting is definitely high on my list and our commission. We hired a consultant to help us with the process. We added an ad hoc permitting advisory committee. So we have experts in contract. We have contractors on there, real estate people, residents. That is pivotal because your driveway businesses businesses won't want to come here if they know it's going to take them a year to open their business. They're paying rent for 12 months without being open. So we have to expedite that process for them, and we're in the process of trying to do that. Some of it's a little bit outside of control because the county and Durham has some onerous process as well that's caused a lot of our businesses issues. I actually have an item on this Wednesday's commission meeting to try to address and navigate those issues with Durham, because I mean we've had several businesses shut down for months
Right.
because of these issues, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a lot on your plate.
To say the least, yeah.
What advice would you give to people that are considering going into politics and wanting to follow your footsteps?
Well, probably to try to follow the path I did, and it's not so easy to replicate. I do recognize that I was very fortunate that I had a substantial community that I knew. These are people I knew that believed in me and supported me. And even those who told me afterwards they voted for me as commissioner, like, I didn't really know if you'd be effective or not, but like I had nothing to lose. I knew you. You're an honest guy. I'll give you the shot. And yeah, you came through in a big way. So, but I had a couple of thousand people who came out and voted for me, literally for commissioner, and the numbers keep growing, but they did so for mayor, and the numbers are continuing to grow. So not everybody has that. Like I mentioned, the yard signs. Not everybody has the ability to have 600 people who just on a text and a phone call say, "Hey, you mind if I put a yard?" I'll like, please. And then people would once the yard signs kind of started coming up, people would reach out to me,
Yeah.
and say, "Hey, can you get me your yard sign?" So I recognized that I had that. I was fortuitous to have that, although that was years in the making of cultivating these friendships. But at the same time, I still think the formula is the same. Talk about the issues. Talk about the substance. Do not waste your time talking about, and by the way, that requires knowing the issues and
Right.
knowing and delving into it and studying it. But talk about the issues. Be empathetic. I mean, you either have it or you don't. So thankfully I have it. And try to just be responsive to people and don't go negative, and people will notice it. Especially here, I can't tell you I've never run for a larger office. I mean a larger geographic area, but certainly in a local election like this, people know more than you think they do. Whether they know all the issues or not, it depends. Some residents do, some don't, but the word gets out and it seeps in. And you just do things the right way, most people will recognize that.
I love your attitude that's so positive and optimistic. And I think that's why life is treating you well, because you see the glass half full instead of half empty. And one of the things you just said, you give the people the benefit of the doubt. Many times, one of the things that I tell, my clients and I like to talk about is just that. And what it's actually helped me myself too is when you give someone the benefit of the doubt, it immediately just lowers the tension, lowers the feeling to address some type of animosity or negativity that might arise from that. And you can actually focus on what you want to deliver versus that feeling that you might think that the person's not, oh, they're not going to read this flyer, never mind. Or, oh, who has time for this? Who's going to vote for me anyways? You know, all that negative talk that you could have told yourself
Right.
to keep you from writing that 4-page newsletter, to keep you from even campaigning, to keep you from, you know, just being knowledgeable on the issues, because, oh, who cares about that, right?
Right.
And because you give people the benefit of the doubt and you believe that people are intelligent and that people will do what's right and following your beliefs, to me, that I think is what has really led you to where you are today and brought you so much success.
I think you're right. Actually, just recently, a friend of mine, I ran into him and he started talking and he says, "What's the craziest issue somebody's ever asked you? Tell me." He's like, "What's the craziest thing somebody's asked you? You've been mayor now. You were commissioner for 4 years." And I'm like, I can't think of one. He's like, "Come on, one." I'm like, I can't think of anything that's crazy that anybody's ever asked me. And he looked at me and goes, "I just realized why you're mayor." He goes, "Because you don't think anything anybody asks you." I really don't.
Yeah.
He's like, you're patient and you believe if they're reaching. I do. That's the way I believe. I couldn't think of one thing that I thought somebody asked me that was, and one thing also, people, and maybe I've been fortunate and hopefully this will continue. Well, oftentimes people say, "Oh my God, you must have like residents screaming at you all the time." Blah blah. I'm like, actually, 98% of my interactions are extremely positive. People are appreciative. They realize that I'm working hard, and they're actually mostly I get a lot of thank you. Now it doesn't mean people aren't saying, "Here's an issue, can you help us with this?" No question, but it doesn't mean they're upset at me.
Right.
They're raising issues, and I'm trying to help them. So my interactions have almost all been positive from the residents. You know, from
Right.
the political game could get a little it gets a little crazy sometimes. So I feel very, very blessed.
And what's next for you now that you're mayor? It's funny because I don't think it sounds to me like everything that you've been doing wasn't originally part of your game plan, or, there wasn't really a game plan to begin
Right.
with. Everything's just kind of flowed in the direction in which it has. So maybe you don't have an answer for me, but do you have one for what's next?
I spend literally almost zero time thinking about that. Every so often, somebody will say, "Hey, would you ever do this? Would you ever run for this?" And I'm like, so I'll think about it for a minute. But maybe other people quoted this. I recall it may have been Theodore Roosevelt who said, just do the job well that you're doing now, and everything else will flow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer in that. I don't know if there's anything. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing now. I have a 16-year-old son at home, a 12-year-old daughter that my wife and I are raising. So this is it's great because I get to have a great position as mayor of Miami Beach that I treasure, and that I'm really able to help people in so many different ways every day. Some of it's the big things that you see, legislation, law and order, or the resiliency, or trying to help with traffic issues, or trying to help stop overdevelopment. But a lot of it's the day-to-day, helping somebody with a permit who doesn't know how to navigate the system. And or somebody calls up and says they're having, there's a homeless issue in their area, and getting the police involved. Or so many different levels. Or after, October 7th, obviously there was a lot of concern in the Jewish community with everything that's happening in Israel and the Middle East. So there's so many ways you can help people that never get any publicity, but I know, and that person knows that, I was able to help them. So, but the beauty is I'm here in Miami Beach. I'm home every night. A lot of positions require a lot of travel and so it's not something that I would do, I don't think right now. I don't, but so I'm happy with this right now. I've only been mayor 7 months, so I'm happy with this, and I'm not even thinking about that. Maybe next time I come on, I'll have more insights on the next steps, if there are any.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to share with our listeners that you're working on, or maybe that book you say you want to write? What would it be about?
Oh man, yeah. So I think a lot of it about what we've talked about, just being positive and having that upbeat attitude and just trying to do it the right way, I guess. It's, sound cheesy. I think I may have mentioned it, but I'm thinking about it. There was a couple of votes that I took that I'll never forget. There was a very prominent person I'm sure you heard of who told me, he's like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, nobody cares that you took this vote, but yet, you mean if you went the other way, but you were the only no vote, you're going to get criticism for it," which I did, and you can inoculate yourself from that criticism. And I was ultimately like, but no, I don't believe in it. Like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I smile now thinking about it. At the time, obviously I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. And I said to him, and there's a few different times I've said this. It was the time when somebody said to me, "You got to go negative or you're going to lose." And it was these types of votes. If you got to take the other vote or you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. And both times I answered, I gave my reasons. And then I said, I'd rather lose. I'd rather lose. Yeah. And so that probably, maybe that's the name of the book.
I'd rather lose.
I'd rather lose. I don't know. Maybe that's not so catchy.
Well, it's not as positive, but yeah. But I can totally see how that works in your favor.
Yeah. So that's the way I look. And ultimately, I feel like part of the, and it is success. I'm not going to, I like the word you use, obviously, to get to this position. But I've never thought like it was the end all be all. Like, I have to get that. I think that's part of the problem. And that's where somebody once said to me, because somebody said to me, they called me a politician. Oh, that happens a lot, right? I said, actually, I'm an elected official. And they're like, what's the difference? I'm like, a politician is looking to figure out what's politically expedient for them, what helps their political career. That's how I define it. Mm-hmm. An elected official is representing those who elected him or her. So that's the way I'm looking. Actually, in my inauguration, sort of expanding on your question, I repeated a story that happened to me. This was actually short. I get this every so often. I give the same answer, but it was shortly after I was elected as commissioner, and somebody met me for the first time. And he said, "Oh, you're a very important person." I said, "No, I'm a regular guy. I hold an important position." And there's a difference, because one day I'm going to be out of office and I'm just going to be like every other resident. And but that doesn't mean that doesn't diminish the role I have now. I fully recognize the prominence of this position and what I could achieve doing it, not only to help residents on a daily basis, but also to expand the image of Miami Beach in this country and across the world. Mm-hmm. So I don't shy away from that. I embrace it, but at the same time, knowing that really, I'm really just like everybody else. I just had the fortune to be able to have this position and work hard, and I think do it well.
So staying true to who you are, no matter what position of power you're in.
You have to. I tell my family, I tell my staff, I'm like, actually, this came up just now. It actually came up. I just had an agenda briefing. I'll share a story with you. So there's an item about street namings for certain people. Mm. So I made so I had members of my team there, and there's also the members of the city administration in this meeting. And I made a comment like this is so I'm never going to be interested in this type of stuff like this. So somebody from the city administration, not in a bad way, we got along, said, you may be surprised after you're out of office how important this is to you. And I'm like, I turned to my team. I said, do I tell you all the time? Not all the time, but I say it. Like, if I ever become like that, if I ever start thinking about these types of things, like, please, like, bring me back to reality. Like, give me a little smack, because, I mean, that's not why we're here. Again, if you do things well, maybe it all works out and that happens, but that shouldn't be the goal. There's actually, I'm sorry, I'm going on in these war stories, but
I love it.
There was recently an issue came up. It was more like a publicizing something, which I thought was completely irrelevant. It didn't help our residents. It was more like it was more for the elected, so to speak. So my chief of staff gets a call about this, and I didn't know what she said, but she said to the person who called her, the mayor could care less about this. It doesn't help the residents one iota. It doesn't mean anything to me. He could care less. So then I'm in a meeting, and the same question, without knowing what she said, they asked me, so what do you want to do about this? And I'm like, I could care less. It doesn't help our residents in any way. Why do we care? And they started laughing. I'm like, what's so funny? And that was the same comment, because if it doesn't benefit our residents, yeah, I could care less. It doesn't help us. It's not why I'm there.
Yeah.
So that's I guess the sum up. That's the book. The optimism, doing it the right way. I guess there'll be other nuggets, because we don't have time to. But you're constantly. I do recognize I'm in a. It's a blood sport.
Yeah.
Politics. There's no question about that, and you got to be ready to deal with that.
Yeah.
But I think there's ways to deal with it in the right way, and I'm proud to say that I've done it that way, and the residents have noticed that.
Yeah. Well, you're a breath of fresh air.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so happy that I got a chance to listen to you and ask you all these questions.
You're great, by the way.
Oh,
You really,
thanks.
You actually asked some questions that I had never heard before. So you made me think and ponder.
So I really hope that our listeners are inspired by everything that you shared, and that that politics doesn't have to be all negative and a fight and a war, and it doesn't have to be about sides. It's just about doing what you believe in.
Right.
That's the best for our community.
A fight takes two sides. If one side is not willing to fight, the other side is probably going to stop at some point, because there's nobody to fight against.
That's right. Yep. So thank you so much, Mayor Miner, and I love
pleasure.
the jacket again.
Thank you. I'm glad I wore it today.
You should find one for me. Thank you.
Thanks again.